Greetings everyone, my name is Lince Lukose and I welcome you all to my channel. For today's session, we'll be working on to a poem, and the name of the poem is A Night with a Wolf. This poem is written by a poet, and the name of the poet is Bayard Taylor, B-A-Y-A-R-D, Bayard Taylor, T-A-Y-L-O-R, Taylor. He was born in Pennsylvania, USA, and he started writing since his young age. He began writing at his very young age, and he wrote a lot while traveling, and he wrote about traveling. And his writing about the travel are quite well known. Let's start with the poem. Before continuing, there is one special information that I want to add, that in this poem there are 10 stanzas. I repeat that in this poem there are 10 stanzas, and in each stanza it follows a pattern, the pattern of rhyming words. And the pattern goes as follows, that is A, B, C, B, which means that the second and the fourth line are rhyming, and that is there for the whole 10 stanzas. But the fifth stanza is little different. It can be and cannot be under the pattern of A, B, C, B. We'll tell you why. Let's go on to the poem. Little one, come to my knee. Hark how the rain is pouring over the roof in the pitch dark night, and the winds in the woods are roaring. Hush, oh darling, and listen, then pay for the story with kisses. Father was lost in the pitch black night, in just such a storm as this is. High on the lonely mountain, where the wild men catched and waited, wolves in the forest and bears in the bush, and I on my path belated. The rain and the night together came down, the wind came after, bending the props and the pine tree roof, and snapping many a rafter. I crept along in the darkness, stunned and bruised and blinded, crept to a fir with a thick set boughs and a sheltering rock behind it. There from the blowing and raining, crouching I sought to hide me. Something rustled, two green eyes shone, and a wolf lay down beside me. Little one, be not frightened, I and the wolf together, side by side, through the long, long night, hid from the awful weather. His wet fur pressed against me, each of us warmed the other. Each of us felt in the stormy dark that the beast and the man was brother. And when the falling forest no longer crashed in warning, each of us went from our hiding place forth in the wild wet morning. Darling, kiss me in payment. Hark how the wind is roaring. Father's house is a better place when the stormy rain is pouring. I hope that you have gone through the poem. Now let's go on to the explanation, stanza by stanza. Let's go on to the first stanza. As I mentioned before, that these stanzas are following the pattern of A, B, C, B, which means that the last word will be same for the second and the fourth line. The last word for the first line is knee, the second line is pouring, the third line is night, and the fourth line is roaring. So knee, pouring, night, roaring. So in this, the first line word is different, the third is also different, but the line second and fourth, they are rhyming. Pouring, roaring. Now let's go on to the explanation of this stanza. It says that little one come to my knee. Now the poet is telling maybe to the listener, could be the daughter of the poet or maybe the son of the poet or any of the children to whomsoever he is saying about this instance. He says, come to my knee, come closer to me. Hark how the rain is pouring. Listen how the rain is pouring. Over the roof in the pitch dark night. He is saying about a dark night when the rain is pouring on the roof. And the wind in the woods are roaring. And he also says that the winds that is flowing in the woods are roaring and are making noise. In the second stanza, the last word of each lines are as follows. That is listen, kisses, night, this is. Listen and night are the two unrhyming words. They are not rhyming, but kisses and this is are both rhyming. As I said, the second and fourth line are rhyming in all of these stanza. Let's start with the second stanza. Hush, my darling, and listen. He says to the listener to be quiet and listen to what he is saying. Then pay to the story with kisses. And he says that in return of the story, you can pay me back with kisses. Father was lost in the pitch black night. He says that the father was lost on a very dark night in just such a storm as this. He also mentions that the storm is just like the storm which is happening right now. Maybe to whomsoever he is telling the story, that very moment there is storm, and the poet remembers about that instance which happens to him and give the story or tell the story to the listener. Father was lost in the pitch black night in just such a storm as this is. He says that the father was lost, and he was lost in a pitch black night, a very dark night he was lost, and at that night there was a storm also coming. On to the third stanza. In this, the last words are mountain, waited, bush, belated. Now, the second and fourth lines last word are again rhyming, waited and belated. He says that he was on top and the mountain was lonely. There was no other mountains around where the wild men watched and waited. He says that generally there people, the hunters, used to wait. He says that that was the place where the wild men used to wait and watch over things. Wolves in the forest and bears in the bush. He says that the wild men used to watch and observe where are the wolves and where are the bears. And I on my path belated. And the father says that he was on his way and he was very late. On to the next stanza. In this fourth stanza, the last words are as follows. Together, after, roof, rafter. Now here also, the second and fourth line, last word are rhyming. The rain and the night together. He says that the rain was also there and it was night. Both things were together. Came down and the wind came after. He says that the rain and the night came and together, and he says that wind came after these two elements came in. bending the props of the pine tree roof. Now he says that the pine trees are wearing a prop. Prop is a disguise or the dress. He says that the wind was bending the props. They were bending the pine tree's top, he's saying, and snapping many a rafter. He says that they were also snapping, breaking off many branches of the trees. Could be the pine trees. On to the next stanza. This is the fifth stanza. The last words are darkness, blinded, bows behind it. Now here is what I've said as before, that here the second and fourth word are not exactly rhyming, but we can also say they are little bit rhyming as well. Blinded, behind it. Fine. Which is why we can say that it is also rhyming. I crept along in the darkness. He says that he was creeping. It was too stormy that he was unable to walk, and he was creeping in the darkness. Stunned and bruised and blinded. He says that he was very much in the shock, and he was bruised by the branches of the trees, and says that he was blinded because the bushes or the tree branches must be moving very fast, and he was unable to protect him with those branches, and which is why he got blinded because of that. He says that he was stunned, he was very much in shock of that, and he was bruised by those branches, and he was also blinded by those branches. Crept to a fir with a thick set boughs. He says that he was creeping towards a fir which has got a thick branch. To that particular tree with a thick branch he went, and sheltering rock behind it. And he was also saying that there was a rock behind that tree. There from the blowing and raining, crouching I sought to hide. Now we'll be starting with the sixth stanza. The last word of each line in stanza 6 are as follows. Raining, hide me, shone beside me. So here the last word of second and fourth line are rhyming. They are as follows. Hide me and beside me. Now let's start with the stanza. There from the blowing and raining, crouching I sought to hide me. Now in that blowing of wind, the fast wind and the raining, he was somehow crouching and was seeking hide him somewhere. Something rustled, two green eyes shone. He says that he heard the rustling sound and he saw two green eyes. And a wolf lay down beside me. And he says that there was a wolf and it was sitting beside him, or it sat beside him. On to the next stanza. The seventh stanza. The last words are as follows. Frightened, together, night, weather. Now, together, weather. The two rhyming words of line 2 and line 4. Now let's go on to the stanza. Little one, be not frightened, I and the wolf together. He says to that listener, and maybe a child, to whom he is saying this instance or about this particular story he is telling. He says to the listener that do not be afraid. He said that he and the wolf were there together, side by side through the long, long night. He says that they were together the whole night, the whole long night, hid from the awful weather, and they both were hiding themselves from the harsh weather. On to the next stanza, the stanza number 8. The words are as follows. Me, other, dark, brother. Now, as again, it's rhyming. Other, brother. Of line 2nd and 4th, the last word of line 2nd and 4th are rhyming. Let's start with it. His wet fur pressed against me, each of us warmed the other. He says that the wolf was pressing against that man are pressing against the storyteller, and he says that each of them, both of them were warming each other. They both were together and they were close to each other, pressed against each other and getting warmth of each other by each other's body. Each of us felt in the stormy dark that beast and man was brother. He says that each of them in that stormy dark night felt that the beast and the man were brother. At that very moment, they both were brother, as this they both were feeling. On to the next stanza, stanza number 9. The words are as follows: forest, warning, place, morning. Line number 2 and line number 4 again rhyming. Let's go on to this explanation of this stanza. Stanza number 9. And when the failing forest no longer crashed in warning. This stanza says, and when the failing forest no longer crashed in warning. He says that when the storm stopped, when no longer the forest was falling without any warning, each of us went from our hiding place forth in the wild wet morning. He said that both of them left their hiding place and went toward the wild wet morning. That towards a wet morning they moved on. Last stanza is as follows. The rhyming words: payment, roaring, place, pouring. The last word of second and fourth line are again rhyming: roaring, pouring. Now let's go on to the explanation. Darling, kiss me in payment. He says that he told this story to that listener and he asks for the payment. And the payment of the story is a kiss. He says, hark. Hark means listen. How the wind is roaring. He says, listen how the wind is roaring, how it is making sound. Father's house is a better place when the stormy rain is pouring. He says that the house of the father is more safe than, he says that the father's house is the safest place when there is a stormy rain and pouring. When the stormy rain is pouring. He says that the house of the father is safe when there is storm and rain outside. Hope that this session was helpful to you. Till we meet again, happy learning everyone.